Hello and welcome to another episode of Driven by Doing. Today we have got Ora Tanner. Ora, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me here.
Yeah, so Ora works at the intersection of education, technology, policy, and research. She has got great background and expertise, especially in the tech space, and she is one of the co-founder for AI Forum. So I had the pleasure of connecting with Ora a couple of times so far, and I'm super excited today to actually talk to you and learn more about you and how did it all got started and where you are today. So going back so where are you originally from, Ora?
I'm originally from St. Paul, Minnesota. So from those not familiar, it's up by Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wisconsin. So I grew up there, born and raised with my parents, who are both from Mississippi, which is kind of interesting. But I was one of seven. So I have three older brothers and sisters and three younger brothers and sisters, and I'm right in the middle.
Wow. So did you go to school in Minnesota?
Yeah, through high school, but when I graduated, my original plan was to go to Georgia Tech, but my parents just wanted me to get a different experience, so I ended up going to a historically Black college university in Nashville, Tennessee, which I'm grateful for. And then I ended up transferring to another HBCU in New Orleans and finished out and graduated there, but I majored in physics. So
Wow. So after that, now you are actually a researcher and a scholar at University of South Florida, and you're just about to finish your doctorate degree as well. And could you tell me a little bit of how did you get to University of South Florida, and what is the research area that you are currently working on?
yeah, so once I finished my bachelor's, I wanted to continue in the space of physics. So I ended up, applying a bunch of different places, but they had a program that I originally was interested in. It was more like biomedical physics type of deal. So they're starting a new program here in Tampa, so I applied. So I got my master's at University of South Florida. But I was working as a nuclear physicist. Actually, on the campus, they have what's called the Moffitt Cancer Research Center. So I was actually doing research, cancer research for breast cancer and brain cancer. But then I ended up getting married and, having children. So since I was working with really high energy radioactivity, I did not want to harm my child. So I kind of got out of that and did like a 180, getting into education. So when I went to put my son into preschool, I was kind of like, honestly, didn't trust anyone. Like, what are they going to be teaching him at preschool? So I ended up taking a job as, at the preschool. And so when he moved up to elementary, I became an elementary teacher. When he moved up to middle school, I became a middle school science educator. And then turns out I really loved teaching. So, I also taught high school physics. And then I did informal teaching at a regional science center here in Tampa, and also ended up teaching astronomy at the community college level. And to your question, why I ended up going back to get my PhD is during my time as a middle school science teacher at a Title I school, these are the students that, everyone says they can't learn. And even though they were in 8th grade, they were like at a 3rd grade reading level. But I was able to harness technology to just really empower them. And, I just saw them bloom and grow, and they really learned the way I was teaching them. So instead of covering content, I was actually creating experiences. And then I also put the technology in their hands. So instead of just taking the test, I would be like, well, use this flip cam to make me a movie to show me, what you understand. Or I turn my whole classroom into like the digestive system to teach them about it. Or we'd go outside on the track and, run, play basketball, football, to learn about, force and motion. So once I saw, just the potential of how technology could empower these students who people said couldn't learn, I wanted to go back to get my PhD because I want all teachers to be able to teach the way I was teaching. And so that brought me to my PhD. So my research areas, game-based learning and assessment. But once again, I don't like doing things the normal way. So I was like, how can we use games to, one, as a form of assessment, but also how can we use games to address the inequities that are in science education? So Black and brown students tend to always be at the bottom. They hate science, they don't do well. So I always also wanted to address that issue, like how can we get rid of the barriers to their learning?
Wow, that is just simply amazing. And just hearing your ideas and thoughts, like you went on to just move along with your kid to kind of like learn what that experience looked like,
Yeah,
and just seeing through the eyes of a parent, trying to learn and see how their kid is learning today with this new technology, because the way we learn might be completely different how kids are learning today, with all the technology around them. And very interesting research when I came across your research at University of South Florida, and recently I heard your presentation at the EdTech conference. That's what really intrigued me, and how you're trying to create an experience for kids and for students from different backgrounds and from all around the world. Giving that tools in their hands is super powerful. And sometimes we might not realize the potential that they have. And you rightly mentioned that, hey, eighth grade student is actually still trying to do it in the third grade, how he learns, right? You see what I'm saying? So having that game based approach is super cool for even kids to kind of have that exposure. And also that's how everybody is learning today. They are using technology, and if you make it much more easier to them, they're going to love it even more, to learn, to educate. And especially you're trying to even concentrate in those, especially those areas where there is um, marginalized communities. That is
yeah,
super important. And it is, you're even going one step further, because we might see technology where students might be loving to use in a private school, right? So you're
yeah.
going deep to the next level, where there is a need, there is a must need, to be able to give the tools to everybody equally. And creating that equity is super important. And I'm so proud of your work and your research. And it is definitely is going to not just change the way that we are learning, but also giving those right tools to provide an equal opportunity for all. And thanks for such a great work. And and coming back to your mission to empower everybody, and where do you see, and especially given everything that is going on in the world today, especially with COVID, and people are talking about disrupting higher education, and where do you think higher education is going in the next 5 to 10 years?
Um, well, I actually worked just my previous position. I was the assistant director at the Office of Undergraduate Research. So I got to, interface and work with a lot of students. And every summer we hosted these pre-college summer programs. So we got to work with students who were about to come into college. So I just think that higher education is starting to wake up to the fact that they have to center students in how they're doing education. Like before, it was just kind of like, this is the way it's done. You have to conform yourself and learn the way that we have it set up, this lecture-based, just knowledge, base, like, oh, take the notes and then give it back to me. But the problems, like what we learned from our summer programs, is that we can actually start introducing students to the problems of today. And it requires totally different knowledge base, totally different set of skills, and totally different mindset. And so I think, say like people such as myself and other, I call them emerging scholars, are starting to do research that's showing, hey, these ways are more effective and, show better results. So I think like my university is a rather young university, like we're only, 60 something years old. But so we're able to pivot and really look at what is it that students really need. And we have, recruiting professors who aren't, thinking just the traditional way. And we've seen a lot of, student success, especially for like Hispanic and African American students at my university. So we're actually becoming a model here in the nation. So I just think it's just a pivot moment for professors to think about what's important, and it's the students, and equipping them for real. Like we always say, oh, 21st century skills, you need to be critical thinker and problem solver, but then we don't actually do it. So that's kind of the space I'm in. Like, okay, how do we actually do this? And you do that once again by creating experiences. So to me, I've taught at all the different levels, but one thing I learned from, being a preschool teacher, elementary, high, college, university, is that people learn from experiences. Like they don't learn from lectures. So same game-based, approaches, scenario-based learning works at the college level just as well as it does at the middle school level. So I think with the tools, which is also big on my campus, like our School of Pharmacy is doing some awesome things with virtual reality, augmented reality, mixed reality, game-based learning. So yeah, just using all these emerging technologies for education.
That is simply awesome. And like you mentioned about augmented reality and mixed reality, and what are some of those aha moments that when you're starting to dig in deep about these emerging technologies where students might have a better chance of understanding the concepts or having that experiences, like what are those aha moments that you had to go through while you're researching in these specific areas? Are there any moments there, hey, this is awesome, when you started testing with students that you haven't realized it first, but you started to realize when they're actually doing the testing? Are there any moments of that nature?
Actually, just recently, like as you mentioned earlier, I'm currently co-founder and chief learning scientist at the American AI Forum. And so we are creating, we have created a curriculum that teaches high school students about artificial intelligence, but we're doing it in the context of work. And, there's some other great organizations out there that are, teaching students about artificial intelligence. They're doing it more from a technical aspect, such as coding and programming. But we are coming at it from a non-technical, more like social, cultural, political, economical aspects. And so the content is very different. It's more based on, pop culture or just things that are in the news today. And so when I was developing it, what I was thinking is, hey, I think this will really resonate with students. Like while they're exploring these jobs, they can learn what artificial intelligence is and what it does. And we just did a pilot in Akron, Ohio about a month ago now, and it was just through the roof. As you said, we're in the middle of a pandemic. Students are, having to adjust to being online, but we had students that were finishing our work and ours was like voluntary and they weren't doing their required, so they were like really excited, like, whoa, this, algorithmic bias, or, oh, I didn't know AI was being used, for choreography or for cooking, or, and so we're now doing a second pilot with a program here in Tampa, Upward Bound, and we're seeing the same results. So it's really resonating with students. It's not like, and we're showing them you don't have to be a STEM major And that's something I always say, like, even though my background is physics and I love, love, love science, I don't think we need to STEMatize everything. We just need to, like, hey, this is artificial intelligence. And if you want to be a journalist, this is how you can use AI with journalism. Oh, if you want to be a chef, this is how, you know, I don't need to turn you into a programmer. So,
Wow, that is just awesome, Aura, because the applications, you're directly going into the next step. Like, yes, of course, there are like a lot of startups who are like trying to teach people AI and how to code, how to like learn coding. But I think there is this huge aspect of like the whole experience. That's what you are trying to target. And you also talked about the social, cultural, and political. Like you're almost targeting the same audience but from a different angle altogether. I think that's what the real amazing thing for all of us to learn more about AI forum. And in fact, this is just one getting started off the ground, and this can be applied for any technology. And
yes.
looking at those experiences and giving those experiences like just giving me goosebumps, because that's where my research and like that's what I am trying to learn as well, because I'm more interested in the game based learning. That's what I am trying to like create experiences. Hey, like we can help learn anybody with anything. You do not have to have the knowledge or the background in that specific area, because in my research, what I kind of understood for the last 2 to 3 years, especially talking with these are like graduates and professionals and the next level, right? So you're starting from the scratching the surface of the ground level, where I was like trying to focus on, hey, like what I found out was, out of all those students who are coming out of high school, like 80% of them do not know where to what to work on or what is their major is. And especially I talked with hundreds and hundreds of undergrad students, and they change majors often, trying to figure out what is the best thing for them, because they are trying to figure that out while going to college, which is increasing their student debt, and which is
Yeah.
not super exciting for them. And they had to go through that pain of trying to learn what they really want to do in the rest of their career. And
Right.
sometimes, yes, I was just talking to a assistant vice chancellor at a university last week, and he mentioned that, hey, you know what, I did my bachelor's in music, and I didn't really know what to do in my career. And my parents told me that, hey, you go out there and try to do whatever you wanted in your life. They gave him the freedom. However, what I learned was, sometimes that he mentioned that, hey, I did my bachelor's in music, and then I started to realize that, hey, it doesn't pay well. Yes, I'm a part of a small band, and I had this huge student debt. I don't know, like I cannot just take time or just be on a band for like 1 or 2 years, because the student debt is raising. Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, there is that
Yeah.
balance again. Like, people should know, even before going into college, to really understand, hey, like what are the jobs out there, like what i'm what I'm going to do for the next 3-4 years, because that's time. And it's not just the amount that they are spending to get that degree, but it is their time and effort. And if they can understand, hey, like this is what is going to really help me, and this is what I really like, and once I graduate, whether it is STEM or whatever the degree is,
Yeah.
that is actually going to help me in my career. And once I get to that next level, get a job, now that is next step where I'm going to learn the next piece of it. Like, hey, now I understood, hey, this is what it is, this is my experience working on this job. Now I'm getting exposure to several different things. I'm getting exposure to marketing, I'm going to exposure to finance. Now I kind of like, hey, I'm setting my level field now. Okay, now I'm in a corporate environment. Now I understand these different areas where I'm getting
Yeah.
exposure to. Now I can go for an MBA in finance or marketing or whatever that I really like to do as a next step. So what do you think, like students, from an experience standpoint, that we can help students, especially in their high school, to really understand, and what major that they can choose to get to where they wanted to go in their career?
Yeah. Well, my approach, as I said, I work at the Office of Undergraduate Research, and just even dealing with middle schoolers and high school students. Like, my approach to what you should do in the future is very different. So I personally never ask a student, you know, what do you want to do when you grow up, or you know, what do you want to major in college? I always ask students, what problems do you want to solve in the world? And so when you ask them that or I ask them, you know, what do you really care about? Who do you want to help? And that's what we did at these summer programs. And we would just get these phenomenal projects. So say I care about, you know, water quality for poor people, you know, in other countries, or even here in this country. Okay, that means I'm going to need, you know, chemistry, I'm going to need engineering, I'm going to need some policy. And so when you focus on the problems you want to solve, I think that guides what you should major in, or whether it's sort of, and I also don't just believe in four-year university. I think, because me, myself, even with my PhD program, there were some skills I needed that weren't being offered by my university. So on my own, you know, I'm a self-directed learner, so I went online and took free courses, MOOCs, which are massive open online courses. I took a ton of those. And so I took a bunch in game design, because at the time they didn't have no one was doing anything with game design, but games is something I was interested in at the time. And I did end up, you know, developing quite a number. So I would just tell students, you know, get the skills you need for the problems you want to solve. And there's a bunch of places to get that education from. And so I always share those resources, you know, whether it's a MOOC, whether it's on YouTube. There are just so many free resources out here. There are so many books that you can get. And then just one last thing is, I also don't believe you have to limit yourself to doing one thing. So at the top of the show, you said I work at the intersection of education, technology, policy, and research. And I'll probably be adding something else to that in another 2 to 3 years, you know, because I don't believe in either or. I believe, why can't we do them all? Like, I can do education and technology and policy. So that's my take.
That is awesome, because like that's what I tend to do. Like, hey, like, why don't I learn about entrepreneurship? Why don't I learn about digital marketing? And sometimes people like see that as not a focus, right? That's what we kept hearing. And you know what? Like, my focus is education. That's what my single focus is. I'm trying to learn all these different skills to actually apply on what my focus is. So my focus is just education. That's what you're trying to do as well, right? Your focus is helping kids learn the easiest and most fun, provide that most fun to help them engage and learn in that environment. So that's your focus as well, right? So when people see us like trying to do several things, then like that's what like my answer is. Like, what's your answer? What's your take on it, Ora?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten that from my professors. They're like, you should only be doing this one thing. But what I like to say, and I've found this to be true in my life, like, you know, I've been a part of some amazing opportunities, internships, fellowships, is because I think it allows you to come up with much more interesting solutions to problems. So say if I'm in an engineering space, everyone around me, you know, when I was coming out through my degree, is mostly, you know, white males or from Africa, India, China. No Black females are there, but because I have this background in, you know, early childhood education, because I have done this thing in game-based learning, when I approach the same problem they're looking at, where they have the traditional, you know, physics and, you know, statistics and calculus, they're going to tend to come up with the same types of solutions. But my background is very, you know, diverse. I think that allows me to look at problems in a totally unique and different way. Like, I can apply, say, like if you were in nursing, but you started working for an education firm, you might, you know, look at things or from the environment. And I actually just had that happen. I was working on a project with disinformation and deep fakes. And so instead of just making the traditional report that you normally do at the end of something like this, I actually ended up making a game-based fiction tool, media literacy tool. So in this game, you're taking on the role of like a political candidate, and then all these different things that have to do with disinformation and deep fakes. You're kind of, working through it in this game. And they were like, these are policymakers. They're like, this is great. Oh my God, I would have never, So I just think it just allows you with this disparate backgrounds to come up with more interesting solutions to problems.
That's just amazing. So what do you tell, any students who wanted to dive deep into game design, or what are the free resources that they can get started with?
Well, as I mentioned, the massive open online courses, which are MOOCs, so there are platforms that are offering these free classes from places like MIT and Stanford, Berkeley, like University of Michigan are top institutions. So Coursera is, a big one. There's one called edX, that's through MIT, or even if you just Google, because there's a bunch of them. There's one called canvas.net, and they just have courses in anything you can imagine, from the very technical to, history or poetry or just other different things. Also on Twitter, if you, that's another huge place where I've just gotten so much from, and following different people and really innovative educators on there. As far as LinkedIn is like powerfully incredible tool to just connect with people and follow people who are doing this great work. And they also let you know about opportunities. So I would say those are the top three. And then of course, YouTube, but those you have to kind of vet those more carefully. But those are just some of the free ways to get started quickly. Like you can get started today, like right now with those.
Great resources. And again, thanks for sharing those. And coming back to the whole artificial intelligence, and where do you see the future of work, as especially with the impact of the AI?
Well, most people focus on the, robots are going to take my job. They focus on the, loss of jobs, due to automation. However, with the course that we are developing, instead of, human versus machine, we really focus on human plus machine. So we're trying to show them that you don't have to just be a consumer of this technology. We're really encouraging them to also be a creator. So if you're, say, like, in transportation field, which has, a pretty high probability of being automated, there are some opportunities there. Because with AI, there are things that machines are really, really good at, but there are things that humans are really, really good at. So how can I, use this to augment, what I'm doing? And so if we get people to look at it that way, like, how can I use this new technology to, create new and better ways of doing jobs, instead of, kind of stoking the fear, then I think we can really just not even imagine the types of jobs that we'll be able to have in the future. And that's what we're doing with our students through our course.
Wow, wow. So since you're already testing this game theory and helping a lot of schools, and there are great insights that you're getting as you're working with more and more schools. And again, coming to the instructional design side of things, and you're an expert in that area as well. So what do you think, what do you suggest people listening to this who are teachers or who are professionals, just from an instructional design standpoint, how to get started in ways that help students or anybody whom they are teaching to really take advantage of this new emerging technologies?
I think just the main thing, like when you're creating anything, whether it's, a lesson plan, a worksheet, a game, even just a slide presentation, like you really do have to start with your audience. And so like for what we're building, like I did a lot of research on the front end about who these students are. So this is Gen Z. These are, students who were born, after 1995, some say 1997, but what is it they're into? Where do they get the majority of their information? What is it they're interested in? So because I know 90% are on YouTube. Okay, that lets me know I need to have a lot of, multimedia video content. For this generation, it's really important to them, civil rights and social justice issues. So I need to make sure that my examples and, what I'm covering incorporates those types of issues into it. They really are concerned, the generation now about, financial stability and having a good job. And that's why we chose careers as the context for learning. So the success we're seeing, I'm like happy, but I'm also, not surprised, which is my second point. Make sure what you're doing is evidence-based. So look at people who have already, done research or work in this area. And a lot of times the principles are already there. So don't just make up stuff on your own. Like go to, if you're doing something, make sure there's a reason why you're doing it. It's, based on, some theoretical or conceptual knowledge of why it should work. And then just don't be afraid to be creative. Like someone might not have done what you're doing, or it might be out of your comfort zone, but don't be afraid to try new things, or
That's
even, yeah.
that's such a great advice, because trying different things is how you learn, because sometimes what you learn in class might be completely different once you start working, because that's what we all realize getting degrees from colleges, right? So the way that we work outside class is completely different, is what we actually learn in class. And sometimes even I was talking to the other day who's a digital marketer, he said like, hey, I got a master's in marketing, and what I do now has nothing to do with what I learned in class. Everything that I learned is actually at work. So what are those opportunities that you see where even in the higher education space that can make a little bit more difference to students to get that real exposure, instead of like just learning the way we have done it for decades?
Like I always go back to what we were telling our students, at the Office of Undergraduate Research, but you can set up informational interviews. So I myself have just gone on LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. I like what that person's doing. You reach out to them and then just ask them questions about what is it really like to be a lawyer, or what do you do on a day-to-day as, a construction worker, shadowing people. If there are people, in your family, in your community, your neighborhood, hey, do you mind if I just hang out for a couple of hours and watch, what you're doing? There's always, internships that you can apply for, but you can also volunteer. And a lot of times, those volunteer opportunities can actually turn into a part-time job or something. So I know myself coming up, and which is one of the reasons why I ended up going into physics. There are just other community-based programs, say like Upward Bound, or I was part of a program called Inroads, but they gave high school students internships. So I was in like 11th grade and I had an internship at 3M. And then my senior year, I had a, internship at a Mayo Clinic. So these are like top, and while I was there, I was like, oh, this is amazing. I want to do this. Yeah, you can, even if it doesn't appear, and I always have in my mind, students from, marginalized backgrounds. I myself kind of grew up in, I guess what some people would consider, poor. I did not know I was poor at the time, but yeah, you can make your own opportunities. Like if you just connect with someone, hey, I just read your paper, just want to say, hey, I really liked it. Even if they don't have an opportunity then, just still keep in touch. You can start doing your own research projects. Like you don't have to be in college to do research. Like I remember just doing small projects myself, by, going to the library or, being on a computer, like, hey, I wonder what happens when you do this, and just reading up on stuff. So there's just a lot of things you can do with just use what you have, is what I'll say.
That is amazing. And again, like all the people who are listening to this podcast episode, I think there are lots of learnings that they can actually start right away to get it off the ground of whatever the work that they're doing or whatever the area that they're interested in to learn about. And I think I had so much pleasure talking to you as well. And now coming to the next part of things, where you're also working on a very interesting project for Florida school safety and for protocol project. And why do you think the data driven school safety is super important now more than ever before?
Yeah, I think just because we're at a point where it's finally come to the forefront about unintended consequences, with technology. I think before it was just, hey, we create, a system, we put the data into it and let it run, and it will be perfect. But just moving forward, safety has become a number one concern. In light of COVID, I'm not sure how that will work, but just the role that we have allowed technology to play in our schools, I think is more, coming under the microscope. And then if we just step back from that and look, especially with the protests we've had recently, how things like, facial recognition, and just these surveillance technologies that are being used. And then just with big companies, dismantling their facial recognition, programs because of bias, I think it can't be denied. Like before it was just kind of like, that was just an instance of it happening. But we see bias, in who gets to make the technologies, bias in how the technology is being developed, and then bias can enter in when it's deployed. And so I think when it comes to schools, we definitely have to answer those questions. Like,
Yeah, I think again, kudos to working on that very special project, and because that is going to like really shape a lot of schools from across the country. So I think I really appreciate your work on it. And I thoroughly enjoyed again, once again, talking to you today. And thanks for having some time to talk to us. And those are listening to this podcast, I hope they really enjoyed the show, you as a guest, and sharing those great insights of like on game-based learning and how we need to think from a problem standpoint. And you kind of raised a very unique point where instead of asking students or kids at a very early age what major to choose or what major they're interested in, asking the right questions of what problems that they wanted to solve or what their true interest is at that early age will actually trigger so many different opportunities. And even from a parent standpoint, it is actually going to make them feel good that, hey, my kid wants to solve a problem in water, or like, there are so many poor countries around the world, and asking those right questions is super critical. And thanks once again for being on the show. And if people who are listening to this wants to reach out to you, where can they find you, Ora?
I am on Twitter at OD Tanner. I'm also on LinkedIn. You can just do Ora D. Tanner, or you can email me at Ora, which is ORA, at AIForum.org.
Thank you so much. Pleasure talking to you.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. This was great.
Awesome. Take care.
Okay.